By Iqbal Latif, Robert Kiyosaki has been saying the same thing since 1997. The dollar is dying, fiat is fraud, buy gold, buy silver, buy real estate, buy Bitcoin. Nearly 30 years, same prediction, same conclusion, same sales pitch at the end. The dollar is still here. Before you read further, read what I am responding to. The Facebook post is here, facebook.com, Robert Kiyosaki, posts, Bretton Woods, the deal that changed, money forever most people. Think money is, Moan 1447351675646. The YouTube version is here, youtube.com, shorts, UFIB I2QFW. Now let us go through it. Claim 1, Kiyosaki claims, in 1944, 44 countries made a deal. Only one country got rich from it. This is false. Germany became rich, Japan became rich. South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, France, Italy, the Netherlands, the Nordic economies, all became prosperous within the very Bretton Woods system he condemns. These were not marginal improvements. This was the largest expansion of middle-class wealth ever recorded. Entire continents rebuilt from rubble into advanced industrial economies. If the system enriched only America, these nations should not exist in their current form. Yet they do, and they rose inside that system, not outside it. Claim 2, Kiyosaki claims America is untouched and holds 75% of the world's gold, implying something sinister. There is nothing mysterious here. The world paid America for survival. Britain and France liquidated reserves to buy weapons, food, steel, ships, and fuel. That gold was not taken, it was exchanged. It was the accounting outcome of total war. Claim 3. Kiyosaki claims 730 delegates met at Bretton Woods and America wrote the rules as coercion. Look at the condition of the rest of the world. Britain was bankrupt, owing America more than its entire GDP. France had been occupied and stripped for 4 years. Germany was rubble. Japan was weeks from 2 atomic bombs. The Soviet Union had lost 27 million people. Every other participant was destroyed, occupied, or exhausted. America stood alone not because of conspiracy, but because geography and industrial scale had spared it. The delegates faced a void. There was only one economy capable of anchoring anything. America writing the rules was not coercion, it was necessity. Claim 4, Kiyosaki claims the dollar became the world's reserve currency with a gold convertibility promise, presenting it as the start of a scam. He conveniently omits what followed 4 years later, the Marshall Plan. The United States transferred roughly 5% of its GDP, $13.3 billion in grants, not loans, to rebuild former enemies and devastated allies. America rebuilt Germany. America rebuilt Japan. Without that dollar liquidity, 1945 becomes 1919. Versailles, reparations, hyperinflation, a wiped-out middle class, and eventually another world war. The system he attacks prevented another world war. He leaves this out because including it destroys his thesis. Claim 5, Kiyosaki claims America could print dollars and the world had to accept them. The greatest economic advantage ever handed to one nation. Nothing was handed. Reserve currencies follow power. Spanish silver dominated when Spain controlled the sea lanes. Sterling dominated when Britain controlled the seas. Sterling's decline was accelerated at Suez in 1956 when Britain tried to project force and America said no. The financial collapse followed the military retreat. It always does, in that order. Today, every major maritime choke point is under American security influence. Gibraltar, Suez, Hormuz, Malacca, the South China Sea, the Bering Strait, the Panama Canal. No BRICS nation controls a single one. China cannot guarantee safe passage for 80% of its own energy imports through the Strait of Malacca, the artery it depends on most. Currency follows security. It always has. The dollar was not handed an advantage. It earned its position. Claim 6. Kiyosaki calls this exorbitant privilege. America prints money, runs deficits, exports inflation. Without those dollars, there would have been no global reserves. Europe faced a dollar gap so severe, nations could not pay for imports. The Marshall Plan solved exactly that. What he calls exported inflation funded the Japanese miracle, German Reconstruction, and the entire East Asian boom. He calls it exploitation. Germany and Japan called it Reconstruction. The recipients of this so-called exploitation went on to become the second and third largest economies on Earth. That is not the record of a rigged system. That is the record of the most successful economic architecture in history. Claim 7 Kiyosaki says Robert Triffin saw the system required America to cheat. Triffin described a structural tension, not cheating. He proposed an international reserve asset to replace the dollar. The world looked at that proposal and rejected it, because no other system offered the same liquidity and scale. That is not a conspiracy. That is revealed preference. Claim 8. Kiyosaki says France figured it out and demanded 3,000 tons of gold back. The figure is exaggerated, but the larger point is wrong regardless. De Gaulle's demand did not expose fraud. It proved Triffin right. Gold was too small to back a growing global economy. All the gold ever mined in human history is worth roughly $25 to $30 trillion today. World GDP is $110 trillion. The arithmetic never worked. This was not cheating. This was mathematics catching up with a system designed for a smaller world. Claim 9 Kiyosaki says Nixon broke the deal on August 15, 1971. No vote, no negotiation, a betrayal. It was not a betrayal, it was survival. The gold standard had already been tested under pressure and failed catastrophically. In the early 1930s, central banks raised rates to defend the gold peg instead of cutting them to save their economies. They chose the metal over the people. Britain abandoned gold in 1931 and recovered faster. America held on longer and suffered longer. Every country that clung to gold longest suffered most. Now bring that forward to the modern world. In 2008, under a gold system, there is no quantitative easing, no liquidity expansion, no rescue. The financial system cascades into a global depression across a $70 trillion economy. In 2020, with the entire world shutting down simultaneously, governments cannot finance emergency support at the scale required. The pandemic becomes a permanent economic collapse from which the weakest economies never recover. Nixon's decision in 1971 was the precondition for both of those rescues. The flexibility Kiyosaki condemns is precisely what saved the world twice in living memory. Reversing it means accepting that the next crisis produces a collapse we do not recover from. The world already ran this experiment. We know the result. It is called the Great Depression. Claim 10. Kiyosaki says the dollar is still the reserve currency even though it is backed by nothing. The world is trapped. This is the central lie of the entire piece. The dollar is backed by the deepest capital markets on Earth. Treasury markets trade over $600 billion daily, more than the next 10 government bond markets on Earth combined. It is backed by the largest concentration of productive companies in history. Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, Tesla, approximately $17 to $18 trillion in market capitalization drawn from investors across the entire world. The gold of today is Nvidia. The gold of today is Apple. The gold of today is what the world wants to own and cannot build anywhere else at that scale. It is backed by the petrodollar architecture. The 1973 agreement between America and Saudi Arabia linked oil to dollars in exchange for security guarantees. Every nation that burns oil, which is every nation on Earth, must acquire dollars to purchase it. That is not a trap. That is an architectural anchor built over 50 years and renewed by every energy transaction since. It is backed by control of every major sea lane on Earth. And it is backed by the revealed preference of the most sophisticated investors in the world, Norway's $2 trillion pension fund, Japan's pension fund, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait. These are not trapped nations. They are sovereign treasurers of independent states making rational decisions about where depth, liquidity, rule of law, and exit capacity actually exist. If the dollar were backed by nothing, someone would have found the alternative by now. 60 years of looking. Nothing found, because there is nothing to find. Claim 11. Kiyosaki says every time they print, your savings lose value, prices go up, your paycheck buys less. He shows only one side of the ledger. Charlie Munger watched the dollar lose value for 99 years. His verdict: he remembered the 5-cent hamburger and the 40-cent hourly wage, and still concluded that inflation had not destroyed the investment climate. A man who compounded wealth across 9 decades of dollar expansion was not alarmed by dollar expansion. He understood what Kiyosaki does not. The question is not whether prices went up. The question is what was built while they were going up. The real question Kiyosaki never asks is who actually had dollars when they were worth more. Who could afford the 5-cent hamburger? My own mother, a working woman, described her childhood. Things were cheap, she would say. I would ask her who could afford them. She would pause and say, only the rich. There was no liquidity. None. In my entire neighborhood in Sukur in the 1960s, there were 3 cars and 1 telephone in our house because my father was a doctor. Today, that city has 50,000 cars. 90% of Pakistani households have a mobile phone. Cheap prices without liquidity is not prosperity. It is poverty with a pleasant price tag. Now measure the dollar not against the grocery basket, but against every currency that competes with it. In 1924, 1 British pound bought 4.42. Today, it buys 1.35s. The pound has lost over 70% of its value against the dollar across a century. In the 1920s, $1 bought roughly 2 Japanese yen. Today, $1 buys 154 yen. The yen has lost approximately 98% against the dollar. The Iranian rial stands at roughly 1.5 million to $1. The Saudi rial has voluntarily maintained dollar parity for 45 years because the Saudis, sitting on the world's largest oil reserves, judge the dollar the most stable anchor available. Against every major competing currency, the dollar has won, continuously, for a century. Kiyosaki does not mention this because it destroys his claim. Japan provides the counterexample he ignores. 3 decades of low inflation and tight monetary conditions produced stagnation, not prosperity. The Japanese government and Bank of Japan spent 3 decades desperately trying to create inflation because a growing economy needs approximately 2% inflation to function. Static money is a static economy. A static economy is a dying one. Now look at the side of the ledger Kiyosaki never opens. The same expansion that raised grocery prices raised the value of every asset denominated in dollars. A house in a good American market that sold for $50,000 in 1970 is worth $500,000 to over $1 million today. An English terraced house that cost $5,000 in 1970 is worth $250,000 today. The S&P 500 in 1980 stood at roughly 100 points. It now stands above 6,000. The middle-class household that owned a home and held equities through 50 years of dollar expansion did not suffer. It compounded wealth at rates gold could never approach. The middle class did not grow rich by saving cash. It grew rich by leveraging assets inside a dollar economy. Gulf migrants who earned good salaries for 30 years but could not own property remained relatively poor because their wealth was only their income. Migrants to the US and UK who bought houses grew rich through asset appreciation. The gap between those who leveraged assets and those who only earned salaries is the single largest wealth determinant of the modern era. On debt, Kiyosaki points to American debt as proof of terminal decline. But debt measured against annual GDP is the wrong comparison. It is like measuring a 30-year mortgage against 1 year of salary and concluding the borrower is bankrupt. America's total national wealth, real estate, equities, infrastructure, intellectual property, stands at approximately $180 to $250 trillion. Its debt of roughly $32 trillion represents approximately 15% of total national wealth. No creditor calls a borrower insolvent when debt is 15% of assets. Debt to GDP is the measure that makes the strongest economy on earth look weak. Debt to total wealth is the measure that tells the truth. Claim 12. Kiyosaki says this is why he does not save dollars and buys gold, silver, real estate, and businesses. Gold produces nothing. It pays nothing. It compounds nothing. It sits in a vault. It is dead capital. Indian households hold roughly 22 to 25% of the world's private gold, and India remains relatively poor by per capita wealth. Generations of Indian families store wealth in gold for rainy days that never come. They live and die holding metal that never entered productive use. The societies that deployed capital into businesses, housing, and innovation surged ahead. The gold hoarding societies did not. And there is a contradiction at the heart of his thesis that he never addresses. I have called this the denomination paradox since 1998, first stated on Silicon Investor and across Iranian.com from 2001. Gold is priced in dollars. Oil is priced in dollars. Bitcoin, explicitly designed to escape the dollar, is quoted in dollars on every exchange on Earth. These are not alternatives to the dollar. They are proof of its dominance. The day gold is quoted in gold and the dollar is measured against gold, come back with this argument. Until that day, every proposed escape from the dollar is circular. It requires dollars to execute. It returns dollars when liquidated. The system he claims to flee is the system that gives value to every asset he recommends. Claim 13. Kiyosaki warns that faith in the dollar is running out. Test it with numbers. Central banks hold $13 trillion in reserves. The dollar accounts for 57 to 58% of that, down from 71% a decade ago, after all the BRICS summits, all the sanctions, all the de-dollarization declarations. That is mild portfolio diversification by sanctioned states, not systemic collapse. The dollar is on one side of 89% of $9.6 trillion in daily foreign exchange turnover. The India-Russia rupee arrangement, cited endlessly as proof of de-dollarization, represents less than 0.01% of that daily flow. Russia is sitting on stranded rupees it cannot spend because India exports only $5 billion to Russia against $64 billion in imports. In every crisis, 2008, 2020, 2022, 2025, the world runs toward the dollar, not away from it. In the March 2026 liquidity squeeze, gold sold off first. When the world needs dollars, it sells everything else to get them. That single fact contains more monetary truth than Kiyosaki's entire piece. Claim 14. Kiyosaki offers a false choice. Either hold dollars and lose, or hold real assets and survive. There is a third path. The one history rewards: own productive assets within the dollar system, equities, real estate, businesses. From 1980 to today, the S&P 500 with dividends reinvested rose approximately 60 times. Gold rose roughly 5.6 times over the same period. Households that participated in productive growth vastly outperformed those who hoarded static stores of value. The collapse he has predicted for nearly 30 years has not occurred. The system he calls fraudulent has produced the greatest expansion of global prosperity in recorded history. The experiment has already been run. The gold-constrained world of the 1930s produced the Great Depression. The flexible dollar system of 2008 and 2020 prevented two more. These are not theories. These are outcomes. Kiyosaki offers a story that is emotionally satisfying. It explains hardship by assigning blame to a system. Reality is less comforting and more demanding. The system is not perfect, but it works, and those who understand how to operate within it have compounded wealth at a scale no prior era in human history allowed. The dollar did not make the world poor. It made the world liquid, and liquidity is what turned survival into prosperity.